When you buy a business or when you take over as a CEO of a business, you'll have a vision. You'll have an idea that things can be done to the business to make it better than it is at the time that you take over. Having a vision is one thing, or having an idea is one thing, but making it happen is something completely different entirely. And one of the things I've learned is that actually this is the most difficult, the most challenging part of the whole process. It's not buying the business in the first place, which is hard enough, but it's actually then taking it on to make it bigger and better than it was at the beginning. Today's guest is a CEO of a business. It's an international business. He's what you would call an intrapreneur. He's someone who grew up through the business and became CEO. But he became CEO because he had a view and a vision that the business could be bigger and better. And he's now on the journey of making that happen. So I wanted to talk to him about the challenges that presents and what his experience had been so far, and also how he saw the future. Along the way, we've also got an interesting element of the discussion around the subject of people and motivation. Without more ado, I'd like to introduce my guest today, David Jepson. The reason that I was interested to have this conversation was because one of the things I've realized about the whole thing about buying businesses is that the difficult bit is not buying the business. Well, that's not easy, but the real challenge comes once you've got the business and being able to take the business from where it is now to where you want it to be. So obviously your situation was a bit different because you were working in a business and became the CEO of it. But essentially you're facing the same challenge as a business that's in a particular situation and you want it to be different. And it's the whole challenge of moving that forward. So maybe to start with, just give us a quick background of the actual business. Just tell us a bit about the company, what it does, where it is, and how you came to be where you are.
Right. So the company itself is called B Media Group. And what we do is we publish a magazine called the CEO magazine. So this is it's now a global title and it's published across 6 different regions currently. So we have a CEO magazine edition ANZ, CEO magazine Asia, CEO magazine India, and we have basically a global coverage like that. The magazine or the company was started by a couple of Brits who'd emigrated to Australia. And Chris, who's one of the owners, had learned a particular business model. And what he'd learned was a really powerful way of selling advertising, not based on the traditional way you'd sell advertising, which is through having a large subscription, large print runs, all that kind of thing. He learned a way to sell advertising where you would try and build the relationship between the CEO that you're interviewing and their business partners, which is really powerful when you actually get into the nitty-gritty of it. So he launched B Media Group in Sydney 12, 13 years ago. And originally they were doing titles, industry specific titles. So they were doing something called Australia's Best. So each month they'd cover a different industry. But quite quickly they noticed there was actually a gap in general in Australia at the time for a magazine that spoke to executives and CEOs in general. So quite quickly they moved to launch the CEO magazine title, which was a very quick success in Australia. Then they launched their first international edition was in Europe, and that was when I joined the business. So I just moved to Sweden. This was about 8 years ago, actually. So I joined the company then as their first cohort of sales guys. So we were interviewing CEOs, we were selling the advertising and building the business in Europe from scratch. Obviously, we were able to leverage on what had been done in Australia, but it was a new business here, and we grew the business very quickly. We expanded the team here, and then we've gone obviously from strength to strength in terms of we've launched in Asia, we've launched in India, we've launched in the US, and we launched our first edition not in English, which is we went for Mandarin, so we chose an easy language to go for. So we launched our first non-English publication earlier this year in China.
Okay, but I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that from sitting inside the business as you were, you got a sense that the drive to grow the business, to develop the business, was coming not from the top, but from you and others kind of below the top level. And it was that kind of inspired you to push to get your current role.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think I probably wouldn't go quite as far as saying there wasn't a desire to grow the business from the top, but we had a really special group of people, particularly in that Swedish office. We had this really strong bond. And I think we were all expats in quite a difficult country to be expats. So we had this desire and determination to make something of ourselves and to make something of this opportunity, because there wasn't a great deal of other opportunities out there. And that kind of bred this quite dynamic and aggressive will to do well and to build a business, not just for the business's sake, but because we all had our own ambitions within that. And we just saw this, we saw the possibility for scale of this business model. So that was a really big thing for us that I think drove that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's not a dissimilar situation to what you often get on an acquisition, where you've got a business that has potential. You can see the potential from the outside. The people who are running it at that point have been doing it in a particular way, and often they've run out of steam, or they're just happy with what they've got. So it just strikes me it's a bit of a similar situation, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation. So you become the CEO, and you then got to, once you're in the seat, you then got to figure out, you probably had some idea of where you thought you could take it, I guess, at least in very big picture terms. But then it's a case of figuring out what elements of the business need to change. Exactly within that, what do you do to bring that about? And then how do you implement the whole thing, the whole program? So just talk us through that a bit. How clear was the picture just in your mind about what you wanted to do?
There's a lot of, I think we should revisit a number of those kind of questions step by step, because there's so much to talk about at each stage there. I think the first, in terms of being clear about the vision, it's a really hard one, because when you come in, either as a new CEO or as a new business owner, you feel under pressure particularly from your employees. You feel like they're looking to someone to lead. And you also feel like in order to lead, you need to be able to give them a really clear picture. And quite often, actually, that I do find that is the case. There's a lot of people in the world who do need that. They need that clear picture. And with meaning no disrespect to these people, that's one of the reasons they're an employee of a company. It's because they want that security. They want to know that the bills are going to get paid. They want to know what their job looks like today, tomorrow, next week, next month. But me, even now, and I've become a bit more comfortable in saying this, I still don't have a particularly clear vision in terms of what I want this company to be. I'm each day having conversations around it moves, inches me closer to being able to see that picture. But you never see the picture. In my experience, I've never seen the picture fully. And even sometimes when I get close to thinking I can see the vision clearly, something will happen.
Yeah.
And it goes out the window.
That's the point, isn't it, though? You're not going to see the picture with total clarity and absolute focus, because by the time you do that, something will have moved on. But you certainly had ideas about elements of the business which needed to change and opportunities that were there for the business.
Yes. Yeah. Again, you mentioned before, like, one of the reasons you acquire a business, or one of the reasons you want to move up in a business, is because you see an opportunity to do something better, or you see a potential. Often what you'll find is when you do get into that position, so when you've acquired a business or you become an executive in a company, there's often a lot of reasons why what you thought could happen or should happen hasn't happened. And you never know that until you sat in the chair. You can do all the research in the world, but until you sat in that chair, that isn't going to be clear to you. And then you realize all that time you've been, questioning the competency of the previous owners or the previous managers. Perhaps you were a little bit harsh on that.
Yeah, and if you see that, if that's the case when you're working in a business, because you've been in that business for probably 6 years by that point, then it's even more exaggerated when you're coming in from the outside.
Yeah, I think I imagine that's certainly true. And I also, obviously, the other advantage I have in terms of having been working within the business is going back to the point or the question you had around the vision and the opportunity. It's all well and good you being able to, even if you get to a point where you think you can see part of that vision and you want to drive towards it, that's all well and good, but that's not the most important bit. The most important bit is being able to communicate that to the people within the business. And then on top of communicating it, the even harder bit is getting them to buy into it in a way that's sustainable. So again, like, one mistake a lot of I guess executives make is they have this vision, they want to motivate people towards it, and usually they do it through offering them some sort of reward, whether it's a bonus or share options. But quite often that's not sustainable, because once you've achieved that part of the vision, these guys have then, people have got their hands out ready for the next payout. So you've got to be really careful with that.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, at least for me, as someone who's entrenched in the business, I know the people, so the leadership team that I obviously now manage as the CEO, I knew most of them long before that. I knew what motivated them. I knew where their problems had been previously. I guess then for someone who comes into a business, you don't have that background and you're starting from scratch, which is a real challenge.
Yeah.
You can tell me more than I can tell you on that.
Okay, well, let me just take you on. I just want to go off on a sidetrack for a minute, because you just talked about something really interesting there, which is off to one side, but is extremely relevant. And it's this whole thing about motivation. Because there is literature that says that money doesn't actually motivate people beyond the short term. And things like the share options, these concrete rewards, again, you'll get a short-term impact, but then beyond that, it kind of wears off, and or you've got to give them more and more and more each time, otherwise it doesn't work. So how do you motivate people? If it's not through that, how do you motivate people?
Oh, it's a big question. I agree with what you said. Before going into that, I think money is a really important topic, obviously, in all this. And I agree with what you said. It has a similar impact as taking a drug, I think, for people. You get that hit, you get that high. So you get your bonus paid, and then after that, you come down. And the next hit has to be as strong or stronger. And you end up on that cycle, and people just completely, you almost have to protect people from themselves in that journey, because you'll just lose people.
Which is really interesting coming from someone whose background is sales, because you were actually, you were paid in that way. You were paid on monthly bonuses. And I remember seeing and hearing the state of you, depending on whether you got or didn't get your bonus.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the, I always kind of think sales is a bit of a young man's game, because the amount of energy and emotional torment that you go through, it's just exhausting. And I find it, there's not many people I respect more than people who, you know, are in their late 30s, 40s and 50s, who are still in sales roles, predominantly sales roles. I think that's incredible, the way that they can maintain that, and they've found a way, like a balance in their life, to be able to do a sales role at that point. I don't know if I'd be disciplined enough to hold myself together to be able to do that.
If you'd been paid let's just say, a decent salary to start with, because obviously the way you were paid was a kind of a living wage, but then you made it up on the bonuses. But if you'd been paid a decent salary at the start, would you have worked as hard? Would you have put into it what you did to get where you got?
Honest answer, I have no idea. Because I've not been in it. I haven't. You obviously know my career history. I've not been in a position. Well, until now, I guess. And what motivates me now is, it's not the salary, I guess. It's the responsibility. And I like to think I'm a good, honest person. And if someone's paying you that amount of money, you should deliver to the best of your ability. But the problem with that is a lot of people wouldn't see it that way. A lot of people think they're underpaid. So you know, when you do your surveys within companies, your stay interviews and all that kind of thing, no matter what you pay people, they always think they're underpaid.
But the good people, in my experience, the good people are motivated from within, not from without.
Yeah.
And that's what, I mean, as it all turns out, I think that's what you are.
Now I am, yes.
There's something inside you that makes you want to achieve things, succeed, move forward, grow, develop.
Yeah. Are you trying to take credit for my development here, for my upbringing? Is that what's going on?
Absolutely. All right, but let's move on.
But before we move on, because you did ask about what motivates people, and you started to touch on that, and we got sidetracked by the money thing, which is kind of fitting, because often that is the case. Something I'm really trying to work on at the moment within our business is a purpose-led mission statement. One of the biggest challenges I've faced in this role is because I've always been quite, like you pointed out before, I've come up through sales and traditionally been quite motivated by money. It's been quite hard for me to imagine a world of people that exists who aren't actually motivated by money. It's really hard to get in that headspace, but a lot of people are like that, and they want to be part of something. And that's a very basic human need, is to feel part of a group and to feel like a good person. So that's something we're working really hard on at the moment, is trying to build that into what the company does. And we've never had that before. And that's a really complicated and complex journey, but one I hope will be worth its weight in gold.
Well, if Steve Jobs' experience is anything to go by, it will be. Because
Yeah.
purpose-driven companies are the most powerful businesses that are out there.
Yeah.
But getting it, keeping it, sustaining it is not easy.
Yeah, and I mean, you use Steve Jobs as an example there, which is perfectly fitting. But I guess for people like, I don't know, say you and me, who are not running cutting-edge technology companies necessarily, how do you create a purpose-led mission statement for a company that maybe doesn't have the access or the resources that an Apple maybe, I think is.
You don't have to change the world. You just have to have some impact on your little part of it. And that's your purpose. Your purpose is to leave some kind of footprint behind. And people will get behind that idea. It's just finding an appropriate way to articulate it for your business.
That's a key point. I think, how do you measure that? And that's what your employees will be looking for.
Yeah.
And really complex.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So this is obviously one element of that you've discovered in terms of, the journey that you want to take the business on, is moving it from a transactional business, which is what the target driven company is, to something that's more meaningful. There'll be other stuff as well, because I know you were looking at, I mean, I don't know where it's gone, but you were looking at doing more stuff online rather than in print. That was another area that you were interested in.
Yeah.
Another opportunity that you saw. So just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think, so I'll take that in two parts. So the transactional side of it, we had been, there's probably a lot of businesses are very focused on the month to month. Everything was month to month. So the targets that we set our salespeople, the way we produced the product, it was a monthly magazine. The deadlines that we had, the way that bonuses were paid and calculated, everything was month to month, which I guess as a new and startup business, maybe you need to be a little bit like that at the beginning. But if you're to grow a kind of longer lasting business that has a real impact, you can't be thinking month to month. You have to be able to step back and actually make decisions based on a quarter, or based on 6 months, or even based on a year, if you're really going to grow a sustainable business. Having the luxury to do that has to be earned. That was one of the difficulties I found right at the beginning, actually, being a CEO or someone who runs a business, is you're trying to give this message to your employees and your customers that you're not just a transactional business. You want long-term relationships. You want people to have career paths. You want to develop new products. But in order to do all that, you do need to have a profitable business. You do need to look at the costs on a weekly basis. You do need to look at KPIs and inputs. And that's a real difficult balance to strike, and people can find that difficult to understand, I think. And that's certainly been a challenge I've faced. So that's something to think about. And then, yeah, I mean, the move towards digital was in the media sector. I mean, this has been going on for 10 years plus. You've had newspapers, magazines moving on to digital platforms. Some have done it well, some have gone out of business. A lot more have gone out of business than have been able to do it successfully. Because of our business model, we were not under any pressure to do that. I won't necessarily, that'll take a while to explain why, but we weren't. Having said that, there were huge opportunities for us to deliver a better product through going digital. And that was the reason we took the decision. It opened up a whole range of new product lines. Again, with our business that was very deadline driven, it gives a whole load of flexibility as well on the operations and productions end. And even down to the way we run our accounts, going digital is going to create a whole load of flexibility for us in terms of moving forward. So it was looked at, again, trying to bring people with you on the journey, and there's a lot of things I could have done better there. It was looked at maybe, I think, as a bit of an unnecessary risk within the business, because we were doing fine as a print magazine. And lots of print magazines have gone out of business when they've gone digital. So why are we doing it if we're doing fine? So that was a difficult journey to go through.
There is an argument that says that the time that you're doing fine is actually the time when you need to make the change.
Yes, there's certainly an argument for that. But again, trying to communicate that to, especially within a recession, an economy where, you know, lots of things are up in the air and people are not feeling particularly secure carrying out big change. And again, I completely agree with you, by the way. Like, that's the time to make a change, but it makes it even harder to bring people on that journey. Yeah.
So let's just talk about that for a minute, because in implementing change, you know, there's all very well coming up with new systems. I've got this great idea. We're going to do it this way from now on. You can put a system in place, but at the end of it all, it comes down to people. Yeah. And there's a question about people and their ability to change, or their willingness to change.
Yes.
And sometimes what people say is that, you know, if people understand the need to change, they can change. There's also another school of thought that says, no, what you need to do is lose the people who are doing it the old way and bring in new people who are already doing it the way you want it to be done. So just tell us a bit about your experience in terms of people and the extent to which you've been able to take the existing people on the journey, or the extent to which you've had to bring new people in who already got it.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I'll break that into two sections. You as the owner or the CEO or the person responsible, if it's your idea for a change and you need your team to carry it out, you're asking for trouble. If it's and what I mean by that, if it's your idea and you need people to execute it, you're asking for trouble. I think one of the most important skills in managing people is, you know what the idea is, and even if you are 100% right, you know what the solution is. If you impose that on people, they're not going to own it. They're not going to take responsibility for it. Therefore, it's quite likely to not work. If you can get, there's obviously lots of different ways of doing this, but if you can get people to go on that journey of formulating that idea with you to the point where they actually think it's their own. I've seen this many times. People have this amazing ability when they're looking back on conversations to think that what was said by them, even if it wasn't. As long as they were there and part of that process, they will consider it their idea. And it is much, much more likely to work. So I think that's always important. shouldn't be your idea. Again, not always easy in practice, and takes quite a lot of patience. And in terms of bringing in new people, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this. Depends on what your philosophy is. That's my take on it. And I often like to look at football when I'm looking at kind of business management analogies, because that's what I'm really passionate about. You see it all the time with football clubs. Take Chelsea, for example. They bring people in, they get people out, they do very well. You've then got other clubs who try and do the same thing, and it's a real mess. You could then look at the football clubs who have the policy around the academy, bringing through young players, giving them time, giving the managers time. Sometimes that works. And then there's other times when that only gets you so far. So I've done a bit of both, quite frankly, in the last year and a half. I think a lot of it comes down to the people that you want to keep with you are the people that you trust and you enjoy working with. Skills can be taught, experience can be gained. So I think that for me is the most important thing, is having that nucleus of people who you like, you trust, and you get on with. That's the main way I've made my personnel decisions, I think.
Okay. And how is it going? How's it working out, the journey?
It's going well, I think. It's my first time running a business on this level. I think we've achieved a lot of milestones. We've been able, obviously, and again, during the time period that we've been in, the business is doing as well as it's ever done in terms of many of the key metrics. We've grown the business, not just in terms of revenue, but headcount. We've opened new offices. We've expanded our leadership team. We've brought in new skills, like you said, to supplement what we have. So at the moment, it's going very well. A year in, we've been able to go after a lot of what I would see as the low-hanging fruit. So we've been able to improve systems. We've been able to expand into regions that we hadn't expanded into using the core business model. The next 3 to 6 months will be particularly interesting, because that's when we're going to start diversifying, doing things quite a bit outside of where our comfort zone has been previously. So it's going well. Ask me again in 6 to 12 months.
See where you're working then.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to finish off, I just want to ask a couple more questions. Nice, easy ones, obviously. So firstly, tell us about some things you've got wrong.
How long have we got?
As you're looking back at it from where you are today, what are the mistakes you think you've made since you became CEO?
What mistakes have I made? Communication has been a constant battle. A constant battle. Some of it, I think I've done okay. A lot of it, I haven't done okay. And I have, on a number of occasions, had to apologize to senior people in the business because I felt like I hadn't communicated as well as I could have done. But again, with communication's an art form, not a science. I do firmly believe that. So what one person thinks is right, someone else could think is wrong. So communication has been a battle. One of the biggest mistakes actually was at the very beginning, trying to do too much myself. was a huge mistake. I 6 months in, I brought in a couple of very senior people to help me. So one was a non-executive board member, and one came in as a CFO who actually works part-time, but because he's very, very good, you wouldn't know that from the outside. If I'd have had those people from day one, giving me that senior support and that experience, I think we would be further than we are now in that journey that we've been on. As is often my nature, I learned the hard way. Which, if I'd have, during those 6 months, I learned a lot of lessons the hard way. And if the first thing I would have done would have been to get in that senior help, I probably could have been taught some of those lessons in a nicer way.
Okay.
I would say that's my biggest mistake, trying to do too much.
Yeah. So you've talked about lessons already, but just tell us some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from this experience.
I think one of the problems you get it throughout life, but particularly when you're running a business, and you always try and make decisions for the right reasons. You try and be authentic, which I think is really important. You try and be honest about where your pitfalls are. And you try and do right by people, whether it's employees, staff, sorry, same thing, employees and staff, customers, other stakeholders. Unfortunately, when you try and do the right thing, quite often people might take advantage, or you don't get the outcome that you would have hoped for. I think quite often, that's the reason when us younger people look at you older people, quite often we see a bit of a bitterness. And I think that it's because of all those years of trying to do the right thing and getting screwed over. And I think it's really important that you don't take that personally, and you keep continuing to do the right things for the right reasons. And if people break your trust, you have to be ruthless. The moment you don't trust someone is the moment that you need to move them on, in my opinion. Trust takes a long time to rebuild. And if someone's lost your trust once, chances are they'll do it again. So that would probably be my two key points.
Okay, brilliant. And looking ahead from here, it sounds quite exciting.
Very, yeah, very exciting.
So you're looking forward to the next month?
The next week, the next day. Yeah, I'm very excited about the last quarter of the year. I think the world in general is in a very interesting place right now. There's a lot of opportunities available for those who are willing to be bold and go after them, because of the uncertainty in the world, there's a lot of people, like you mentioned before, sat on their hands a little bit. So again, as quite a young company and a relatively young executive who doesn't know any better, there's some good opportunities to go for. And I think we can have a really big impact in the business world over the next 1 to 2 years.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. So thanks very much for that. Really appreciate your time. And it's been a great conversation. And hopefully I'll see you soon.
Yes, you will. Thanks for that. Appreciate it.